Welcome. This is Beth Jones. I'm so excited to have you here today, and I'm so excited and honored to have my guest today, Craig Alsup. And Craig is with Manna Worldwide in Fort Worth, Texas, and he's Associate Director for Asia, as I understand. They run about 300 projects across 50 countries, rescuing children from poverty, and they do so much more than that. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to get into it, talk a little bit about what we do and what God's doing around the world.
Yeah, so why don't you tell a little bit about yourself personally and then share some stories about your organization?
Sure. I am a husband to Jennifer, a dad of Sarah and Jude, my biological kids that are 14 and almost 12. And then I have four non biological kids that we've sponsored in Nepal for a lot of years. So Asha, Sagar, Sandeepa, and Asmita are there in Nepal still. But yeah, I get the honor of calling uh, six kids my own.
Wow, that's amazing. What a blessing.
It is. It is. Yeah. Never imagined being as involved with so many different lives as I am, and it's a lot of pressure, actually. It's like, man, I've the pressure's on, right? I got to do something useful with my life, and hopefully encourage them to do something good with theirs.
Yes, I believe parenting is the most important job in the world. So, why don't you share a little bit of how you got started with Manna Worldwide?
Sure. So my wife and I had this crazy idea in 2005 when the year that we got married. We decided that we were going to work all the time for the first like 2.5 years of our marriage. We are going to save up all of our money, and then we were going to go and travel the world. And we both grew up in small town Mississippi. We both thought that, like, there has to be something out there, that's different from that, right? And so we worked for 2.5 years, like never bought her flowers, never took her on dates, always ate spaghetti with no meat, the life, right? And we took all the money that we saved from not doing those things. We put it all in a bank account. And at the end of 2.5 years, we sold everything we had. We packed up clothes and backpacks, and we ended up traveling for 16 months to 76 countries on six continents.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, wow.
and it's funny, we kind of called it like a pre-life retirement. Our goal was to like go and see and do all the things that we'd always wanted to do, but to do it when we were like at our most healthy, youngest, best, like, possibility to get to do all these crazy things like skydiving and scuba diving and bungee jumping and trekking up mountains and stuff. And so we did, and we thought that it was all about us, honestly. um, but as we began to travel, our eyes began to open to the needs of the world. And we realized that God had us on the other side of the planet for a long time for a specific purpose. God wanted to open our eyes to physical poverty. We grew up in Mississippi thinking that we knew poverty. And then when we traveled, especially into Asia, the Middle East, Africa, we saw poverty like we'd never seen or imagined really existed. And we realized that it was on a much bigger scale than we ever imagined. Like, we had seen all those, like the things on TV of like the kids in Africa that are starving and stuff like we had seen some stuff like that, but we kind of had this opinion, this picture of it, that it was like a few kids in a few villages in sub-Saharan Africa that were really struggling. And then we realized, no, like, more of the world is more like that than like I grew up, right? As kind of a middle class, person in the United States, I am way up there at the top percentile rank, as far as financial, capability, but also as far as access to the gospel. um, we realized on that trip that kids were being trafficked because their families had to sell them because they couldn't
Gosh.
afford to feed them. Like, we realized that like kids were being or families were being tricked by these trafficking people saying that they were going to educate their kids and taking their kids away, and then they'd never see them again. Like we started to like have our eyes opened to all these atrocities, and we ended up in the country of Nepal. We ended up there volunteering in an orphanage. Um, and we met Sagar and Asha, our two oldest. Asha is now mid 20s, Sagar's early 20s. We met them when they were like 4 and 8, or almost 4 and 8. And we began to sponsor them. And, there's something about kind of putting your money where your mouth is, right? We began to sponsor them financially. We connected our hearts with them and with Nepal, and we said, like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're all in. Like, we're gonna support these kids no matter what, and they're stuck with us, right? And so we ended up sponsoring these kids. We ended up sponsoring an orphanage director and his family and their work there, who were doing ministry and mission work in their community.
Can
And
I
God
stop you
used
just a
that. Yeah,
second?
sorry. Go ahead.
When you y'all had started all this traveling, so I had two questions about that. One, did you already have the money because it's expensive to travel? And second of all, did you go back to the United States and then adopt or foster the children?
No, so we didn't have the money. We were young newlyweds with no money, but what we had was time and energy. And so my wife and I both went out and got 2 or 3 jobs each. We worked all the time. We'd come
As
home
you
at the end.
travel?
No, as we before we traveled.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
and so we decided, hey, we're gonna just suffer through working all the time for a couple years, and then we're gonna go travel. And so that's what we did. We basically got extra jobs. We like bought and sold stuff on Facebook Marketplace. I mean, we did everything imaginable to try to like make extra income. And I would go to garage sales and find stuff for cheap, and I'd buy it and then I'd resell it for a little bit more, and stuff like that. And at the end of the 2.5 years of working hard, we had just piled up a bunch of money. And so we went and spent all that money and basically said, we're going to come home when the money runs out. And until then, we're going to go see the world. And so that's how we did that. And then what was your second question?
It was when did you come back and then foster or adopt the children?
Okay. Yeah, no. So we met them, fell in love with these kids. They connected with us, and we went to the orphanage director immediately and just said, "Hey, like, if we're going to do this, we need to do it right now because the kids need support right now for education and stuff like that." And because we knew that, once you walk away from that person that you can serve and support, it's hard to sort of turn back the clock on that, right? And so we knew, like, we're going to be traveling for another year or whatever. We want to make sure that these kids are supported in the meantime. And so we actually gave them from our travel budget, we just gave them a year's worth of support for the kids. And we're like,
Wow.
here's that. When we get home and get jobs, we'll send more, and so we did. We made it back home from this crazy trip. We got regular jobs. I was a therapist working with kids, and then my wife was has a master's degree in public health administration, so she was director of a public health program. And so we started sending more money to support this work. Jesus said something about that, about, if where your treasure lies, there your heart will be also. And so that's what happened with us, is we put our financial investment into it, we put our hearts behind it, and then God forever connected us with this place and these kiddos.
And then after that, you fostered or adopted more.
Yeah, so over the years after that, we kept giving to Nepal and kept going back and forth, and we led mission teams. And then our pastor eventually comes to us and says, "Hey, you need to meet this guy from Manna Worldwide. They're doing exactly what you want to do, exactly what you're trying to do, but they have like a whole organization that's doing this. It might be, good for you to sort of pick their brain." And what I didn't know is it was a bit of a setup. It was a job interview that I didn't really know I was on, and and so I showed up and I said, "Here's my heart.
Whoops.
Here's our story. I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to help these people. I want them to know Jesus. I want them to have food in their belly." And Bruce, the CEO of Manna, looked across the table and said, "Hey, you might just consider coming on and doing that full time with us." Um, and I didn't know what to say to that. I knew that I was supposed to say I'll pray about it, so I did. Um, and then I got home and told my wife, and she said, "No, we should really pray about it." And so we did. And over the next several months, we sort of began to wrap up things with our normal quote unquote life again. We quit our jobs, we sold our house, we sold a car. We began to scale down everything we had scaled up after our around the world trip. This time we just did it like more for, directly for God, like for this mission that we were on. And so it's funny. It's like our selling everything in the very beginning to go on our around the world trip actually prepped us to come home and then to say yes to Jesus and to do it again for missions.
Hmm.
So it was that much easier the second time.
That is so commendable of you and brave. uh, it takes a lot of courage to do what y'all did. So that is just amazing to me. And when you went on your mission trips to Nepal and things, did God provide the money for you? Because sometimes I've heard two stories about this, or two sides. One is God will provide it every time for your missions. Another is you have to be like a tent maker like Paul and raise, or, get the money yourself, whether it comes out of your pocket, your salary, or someone else blesses you. So did God provide ahead of time for y'all or along the way?
Yeah, so now we are full time missionaries, right? So we travel around the United States and speak. We travel all over the world and lead mission teams, specifically mostly to Asia. And we, as Manna, staff, team members, our first job was to go out and basically raise our personal support. And so we went around to churches, we went to individuals that we knew, business leaders that we knew, and we just say, "Hey, this is what we're doing. If you'd like to get behind us, help us do that. We'd appreciate you supporting us." And so 10 years ago, we came on board with Manna full time. We went and did that. For the first 6 months, it was mostly just support raising for our family. And then it launched into support raising for these various ongoing projects, everything from orphanages to schools, nutrition centers, medical clinics. So raising all the funds to make all those happen on an ongoing monthly basis. And then leading mission teams back and forth so that people get to sort of see the need and see what God's doing around the world. And so, we've done a little bit of both. Honestly, I'm a kind of a serial entrepreneur where, from the time I was like 10 years old, I was buying and selling random things and I was doing all kinds of stuff to make extra money. So I've never wanted to fully let go of that. So I do like have some business ventures and different things that I do to make extra money. Um, but we still depend greatly on just the beauty of, people wanting to get behind us and wanting to support the work that we do and then also support the projects that we're a part of. So, yeah.
Yeah, I homeschooled my children, and our first daughter, my oldest daughter, Heather, after she graduated from her homeschool, God put it in her heart to go do missions work. And so she ended up going to Youth with a Mission. I don't know if you've heard of it
Mhm.
before,
Yes.
in Arkansas. And they had to raise their own funds initially. She had to raise her funds, and the whole class did. And it's hard. It's hard to do that, tapping into all your family and friends. You don't want to aggravate them. But they saw the money coming in miraculously for their entire class to go do these missions in, South America, India, all over the place. So it was amazing to watch.
It always is. I have people come to me all the time and they say, "I want to go on a mission trip with you," and I'm like, "Okay, it's going to be like $3,000 or $3,200 for plane
Right.
tickets and food and all the things, right? Hotels." And they always say, "Oh man, like I don't have that much," and I'm like,
Normal
"Well,
people don't just have it in their pocket and say, here.
honestly, most people don't, right?" And so what I always tell people is, sign up and like pray about it, sign up and see what God does. If God doesn't provide the resources, it wasn't the right time, or it wasn't the right place that you're supposed to go to, right? Um, but you never will see God show up in miraculous ways if you don't take a step, right? If you don't take a step towards something scary or something difficult, you'll never see God show up in those ways, right? It's only when we take steps of faith that we begin to see God, where He's holding us along the way. And so I always encourage people, sign up, act like you're going to go, tell everybody you're going to go ask people for money, and see what happens, see what God does. And, in my own support raising journey, it's funny. I had, a list of everybody I'd ever known. And basically, I just wrote down this big list. And then I thought, I can't ask her. Like, I haven't seen her in 10 years. Or I can't ask that guy that I haven't seen since fifth grade. That would be weird. And so I went around to all the people that I felt like were like my A people, like people that I see on a daily basis, people that like family and close friends and stuff like that. And it was funny because honestly, most of my support did not come from my what I would consider like my A people, like the people that I was most connected with. Honestly, most of my support has come from either people that were way down the list that I haven't seen in a long time, or people that came across my plate as I was support raising. People that I met at a conference or met out and about or met at a church or something like that. And so, I think honestly, I think some of that is God's way of like keeping us humble, right? That if it was all the people that I sort of felt like were a definite yes, then I could say, oh man, yeah, I did a good job like picking the right people, or I did a good job like keeping up with those people and being a good friend or whatever, right? But instead, it's like all these random people from all over the United States, all over the world that support us and honestly, I would have never painted that picture, but God did. And so, yeah, I always encourage people just go and behave as if you're going on the trip and ask lots of people and see what God does.
I would agree with that. But also, my husband Ray, our daughter Heather, and I have all done mission trips to various nations. I would also say he can use your spouse, like Paul's tent making. Sometimes we have to be willing to put the money out ourselves because I've seen amazing things on the mission trips God's sent me on, and Heather and Ray also. He will sometimes, we have to be willing to open our hearts to him, but also our wallet to sow ourselves, and then he will bring that harvest back into our own lives. But yes, I agree. We have to have courage to ask people. It takes courage to ask. Well, you had told me that you had a few stories to tell about Manna Worldwide. Why don't you share those?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll tell you how we were founded as an organization first. In
Okay.
2001, Bruce and Pam O'Neill were missionaries in the Philippines. They were there as church planting missionaries, right? And they maybe had this perspective that like if you build it, they will come, right? You go there, you plant a church, and then you like God provides these people. And what they began to notice in their community after they started a church was that there were kids without shoes. There were kids without food in their belly. There were kids that needed educational support or were getting no education. And they began to look at it like, wait a minute, Jesus would love and serve these people. Like we are his representatives in this neighborhood. And so they began to reach out to people and serve some kids. And the number of kids, of course, grew because the need was bigger than they imagined. And then they started to raise money. They started to come back to the United States and talk to pastors and start talk to people that they knew were interested and invested in missions. And they started to invite them to partner with them to start a full-fledged like nutrition center and educational center for these kids. So they did that. And that gained the attention of the community. The families of these kids started to come around. They started to visit the church. The church began to grow. People were getting saved. I mean, it was, it was almost like, hey, wait a minute. If we do what Jesus did and we like share the gospel with people and we teach them the good news, right? But we also put food in their belly and serve them, then we get the opportunity to be a part of their lives and to see their life changed. And so Bruce was doing that. And then other missionaries from around the world started to contact him and they started to say, hey, Bruce, we need to do what you're doing, but we don't have the resources to do it. How did you raise the money?
Right.
And Bruce is like, well, I had to like run back and forth and I had to talk to these churches and all this stuff. And these missionaries continue to say, like, I don't have the time to do that. Like I have a ministry here in Pakistan or in Kenya or in Nepal or in Mongolia. And I don't have the time to run back and forth to the United States to raise the money from these people. And so Bruce founded Manna Worldwide out of sort of that need, where what he saw was missionaries raising, their base support for their family, and then they leave and they get to where they're going and they realize that the needs are greater than they ever imagined before. And they want to help people, but they don't have the money to do it.
Right.
And so, what can tend to happen is those missionaries can sort of be straddling the world where they have one foot in Pakistan and the other foot in the United States because they're having to run back and forth to try to gather resources, which is not healthy for their family. It's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for their ministry. And so, what Bruce said was, hey, why don't you stay where you are? Let us come alongside you. Let us raise support from churches and businesses and individuals here in the United States. Let us partner with you to do, more work for the gospel than you could otherwise do, and then we'll bring mission teams back and forth to serve alongside you and to see what God's doing. And so that's how it started to grow. And now here we are 25 years later, about 300 different ongoing projects, about 50 countries that we work in, everything from orphanages to schools, nutrition centers, medical clinics, digging water wells, really everything that we can do to come alongside local church pastors and missionaries who are on the field long term, full time, and who say, hey, we already see God at work in our ministry, but really we need some additional resources and support to really fan the flames of that and make that a bigger thing. And so that's one of the stories, is just kind of how where we started from and kind of what we're doing. The I find that people like really like individualized stories, right? And one of the young ladies, actually, I'll try to show you a picture of her. She's on my desk. But one of the young ladies that we know and love, is her name is Kripa. She lives in Nepal. She's grown up in our children's home there in Nepal. I've known Kripa, I think, since about 2012. So a long time I've known her. And, since she was a little girl, and have seen her grow up, have seen her come to faith in Jesus. A couple of years ago, got just the blessing and opportunity to get to baptize her in a swimming pool. It was great. Um, but got have seen Kripa grow up into just an incredible 20 something, early 20 something year old lady, young lady who is now in Bible college, who's now learning to share her faith, who has such a heart for people, who has been uh, everything from just beautiful, incredible, little girl to as a teenager serving the little kids in the orphanage so well, to leading worship with our team every night in the orphanage. They have ministry, kind of a worship time. So she just, I've seen her grow over so much time to now Bible college, looking forward to an internship, serving in one of our centers, serving kids in a community, in a church and nutrition center setting. Anyway, Kripa's incredible. I have a picture of her. I'll see if you can see it.
Yes.
But Kripa is the young lady in the very front here that's kind of leaning across everybody. These are some of our girls from our orphanage. But that's a
Beautiful.
good example of sort of who Kripa is, right? Just like bundle of joy, full of life, full of energy, and just an incredible young lady. But we've seen her because somebodies decide to support this orphanage. We've seen her taken in. We've seen her getting the food that she needs. We've seen her get the education that she needs. We've seen her absolutely thriving in school. We've seen her become this brilliant young lady who knows Jesus, who loves Jesus, who's been baptized, and who is absolutely on fire for reaching people. And God has done all of that through individuals, businesses, and churches who come alongside here in the United States, and they say, like, these kids, like the Kripas of the world, matter. And
Yes.
they matter to God, of course, and that means that they should also matter to us as believers. And so we've gotten to see, these. I have a part of her story, right? And I'm thrilled to have gotten to be a part of her story. But there are so many people from so many places all over the United States who've gotten to be a part of Kripa's story. And so that's one of the things that I absolutely love here, with what we do, is we get to invite people into the story, and they get to see kiddos like Kripa, and they get to go, you know what, like, she matters, and I'm going to come alongside and make sure she has what she needs. And so God has been so good, and has blessed us with the ability to help kiddos like Kripa, and to get to see who they can become, with Jesus as their lead. So it's been incredible.
That's amazing. God is a very practical God, and Jesus fed the hungry, so we can't just tell them the gospel. Their needs need to be met, and so Jesus sees those practical needs. My granddaughter Violet, she was also baptized in a swimming pool, so I think that's so cool. But I think it's amazing how God chose that little girl and raised her up, and how he's using her now through your effort and Manna's. That is amazing. Did you have any other story to share, or
Yeah,
anything you want to add?
we just see those stories played out across the world, right? There's 100 different stories probably that I could tell with
Mhm.
different countries and different kiddos, from witch doctors in Mongolia coming to faith in Jesus and making an impact,
Wow.
to you know to just like kids that have been trafficked getting in off the
Yeah, I
street.
wanted you
And
to touch on that a minute. Like that, my
yeah,
daughter
so
Heather's real interested in that. So
yeah, there's a lot of our projects around the world, honestly, that work in some way against trafficking, and at different levels, right? So we have children's homes in different places, multiple different places in Eastern Europe to Africa to Asia, especially where kids have been taken out of bad situations and brought to us to care for them.
praise
And
God.
then right, and then we've had the opportunity also of getting in on the front end of that before there is a bigger issue. So our nutrition center programs, for example, these are programs that are alongside local churches, where the leaders within that local church run a nutrition program. They go out in the community, they connect with families that are in desperate need, with physical needs, and then they say, "Hey, send your kids to us 4, 5, 6 days a week. Sometimes we will feed your kids. We'll help them with educational support. We'll teach them music. We'll play games with them. We'll do arts and crafts. We'll teach them about Jesus, and that will take some of the pressure off of that family." right? So in a lot of places that we work, people are in such desperate physical poverty that a family has to make a decision. Listen, um, I can't afford for the school fees and the books and the clothing and all the stuff that's required to go to school and feed my little girl or little boy, right? And so they can't afford both. And so what often too often happens is that kiddo doesn't get an education, right? So they don't get the opportunity to learn and to grow and to hopefully level up their family out of poverty someday. Instead, that kid is put in a field helping work, or there's a little girl that I've seen multiple times on the street side in Nepal who sits and sells baby chickens. And that's her job. She has a little basket, and she's probably like 9 years old, 10 years old, and she sits, and her family has her selling baby chicks on
Wow.
the side of the road, um, right? And so often families are having to make these decisions. And so we're coming alongside and we're saying, hey, here's the thing. We care that your kid gets an education. We care that they have food in their belly. So what we're going to do is we're going to take food off of your plate. We're going to make sure that this kid has the ability to get the food that he or she needs. We're going to help them with school as well, but that's going to free you up to be able to send them to school because you're not otherwise paying for all their food. And then we see like, okay, we can help them also with pencils and pens and paper. And we can get mission teams to provide some of those things. And so all of a sudden, this kid who had no opportunity has
Right.
every opportunity. They have the ability to go to school and learn, and they have good food that's making them healthier overall, right? They're learning music, they're learning, how to play different instruments. Some of our leaders are incredibly talented. And I'm thinking of one guy, Santosh, and his wife Sabitri. They are teaching like drums and guitar and vocal lessons to kids, and these kids are learning to sing in multiple languages and play music, and I mean it's just incredible. And you go like, these are kids who didn't otherwise have opportunity, right? And these are kids who could have been out on the street selling something, making them a target for trafficking. These are
Right.
kids that could have been in their family, um, not fed well, not educated, and thus a big target for traffickers. Um, Traffickers will often come into a family that's impoverished and they'll say, "Hey, we'll educate your kids. We'll take care of your kids if you'll just sort of give them over to us, and we'll take them to this other city." And then these families never see their kids again. There's all sorts of different things like that happening, and a lot of our projects work to make sure that that doesn't happen to the kids that we know, right? To the kids that we can support in that community. And um, so there's a lot of different ways that we can sort of head off trafficking situations before it gets to that point. And that's really the side of it that we work on, where we've got responsible individuals within the community that are looking out for those kids, that are teaching them, that are helping feed them, that are making sure that they have their needs met. And that really, really, really helps a family and a community to not end up in a bad situation.
I did not know that, and it makes sense that they would target those hungry children. And then that about the education. My dad was the son of a poor farmer, and farmers way back the generations, and he got his education, his college. He became a CPA. He was the first in his family, and he always said, "Education is the one thing people cannot take away from you." So that is so powerful that y'all are helping also feeding, averting, avoiding the trafficking. That is amazing. So I know that you and I had talked a bit about purpose. So what would you say for someone who feels led to missions, or they have this desire in their heart, a certain purpose? Everybody's got a purpose. What would you say regarding purpose? Like obviously part of yours and your wife's purpose is this missions organization, but also your entrepreneur business stuff. What would you say regarding purpose for people?
Yeah, I would say that, too often we get too tangled up in our own needs and our own sort of like wants and our own like immediate needs, right? So like whether that's how we focus our time and energy, how we focus our budget, things like that. I would say that each of us has a greater purpose than just to feed ourselves, right? Each of us has a greater purpose than even just to support our family. I believe that supporting your family is obviously the responsibility of parents. As a husband, as a dad, I have a responsibility to provide for my family, to protect my family, to lead my family well. But uh, I don't believe that your entire purpose can be wrapped up in just that. I believe that when Jesus gave us the Great Commission, it was a command. It wasn't like a suggestion. It wasn't just a calling. It was a command for each of his followers to go do with what they have, what they could do. Um, now, I am the last person that would ever get on stage and sing in front of people, but for some people, that is their calling, is to worship and lead worship and sing, right? I will get up and speak in front of 1,000 people before I'll sing in front of like two. But that's because I know that, okay, my calling is not to lead worship. My calling is to share with people and encourage people and to provide pathways for people to get involved in missions. And so I think with each of us, we have to look at like, why does God have you here? Like, what is your purpose? What are you meant to do other than feed yourself, right? Other than feed your habits and hobbies and and stuff like that. And so I think for each of us, we just have to question ourselves on how can we lean into the purpose that God has for us and not get so bogged down and distracted by our daily just wants and needs and feelings, but to look bigger than that and to go, okay, if this great commission is for all of us, then what role am I meant to play in this great commission? If the last thing Jesus said to his followers here on earth before he ascended to heaven was to that we were meant to go into Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth, then we should probably take heed to that. We should probably pay attention to, what Jesus said last and, and take into account everything else Jesus said and go, okay, Jesus said we're supposed to love people and we're supposed to love God. We're supposed to serve people and we're supposed to give them this good news. And in some way, each of us as Christians should be doing that. There's lots of different ways. You can travel around the world like I do. You can share Jesus directly. You can share Jesus with your neighbor.
Yes.
You can go down the street, right? You can talk to that person that doesn't look like you or speak like you. Maybe they have different political views than you or whatever. Um, I I love that Jesus said Jerusalem because that reminds us like what's right here at home. Who are we supposed to reach right here at home? And then he said Judea. It's like, okay, a little bit further out. We're supposed to be impactful on people here and there, right? So, like, where else can we serve people? How else can we serve people? Maybe that's going on some sort of maybe that's some sort of in country mission trip, or maybe that's doing something with our church or with our community to make an impact. And then Jesus said to Samaria, and Samaria to the Jew at that time would have sounded like, wait, you want us to go to even those people? Right? Um, Samaria was a group of people, was filled with a group of people that they didn't want to deal with, that they didn't like. They didn't speak the same. They didn't worship the same. They didn't look the same. They didn't want to be like them. They didn't want to be a part of what they had going on. And so for us today, maybe we're supposed to look at people and we're supposed to go, hey, who's my Samaria? Like, who are the
Mm.
people in my life that don't look like me, talk like me, worship like me, whatever, that I'm meant to, have an impact on? And then it says, and to the ends of the earth. Jesus says, and to the ends of the earth. And I think like we can make an impact a lot easier than we ever imagined. When we went to Nepal the first time and realized we could support a kid in an orphanage for like $75 a month, we're like, wait a minute, we thought this was going to be much more difficult, but turns out we can do that, you know, um, and have been doing that since 2008, you know, and now 4 kids over there. And so, I think the thing is just not to overanalyze it, to do the next thing, right? To do the next thing that God puts in front of you. And then B, to realize that you can make a difference and you are absolutely commanded to make a difference by Jesus. Um, and it's up to you to find the calling within the command.
Yeah, I want to, that was so good. I want to emphasize and confirm something Craig said, which is, your neighbor. You don't have to be a missionary across the world doing what he and his wife are doing. God can use you with your neighbor having a cup of coffee with someone. I love coffee, so that's a way for you to interact one on one with people. You have gifts inside of you. I'm very passionate about the gifts. Unique gifts God put inside of you that he wants to use for Jesus' glory. You don't have to be a missionary or go across the world. If God calls you to do that, I encourage you to do that. Some people stop doing what God's called them to do for their purpose. And we want to be found faithful when Jesus comes back. So whatever your gifts are, whatever your assignment, do that thing. Ask God, study the Bible about the gifts, book of Acts, all the gospels. Jesus flowed so well, perfectly in all the gifts. So read those gospels in the book of Acts to find out what the gifts are. And also Gifts and Ministries of the Holy Spirit by Lester Sumrall tells about the gifts. All of the gifts. The gifts didn't cease with the apostles. They are for today, right now, and we need them even more right now because of everything that's happening on the earth. But those are amazing stories, Craig. I'm so blessed and honored that you said yes to being on this podcast. Is there any scripture or a quote or anything you would like to share with someone?
Yeah, I pulled it up on my phone here before we got on because I knew you were going to ask me this question. And I wanted to say it exactly right, but when I was in that meeting years ago with my pastor and with Bruce O'Neill with Manna, and he was inviting me and my wife to come be a part of this organization and to actually do missions full time. My pastor kind of leans over to me and he says, Ephesians 3:20. He says, "Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the
Yes.
power at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen." And that verse continues to, and it sticks with me, and it's a constant reminder that God has plans to do way more than you can ask or think. And you have to step out and say yes to God. He's not going to force you into things, uh, but when you do, you'll get you get your socks knocked off more often than not, because He's going to do something way bigger than you can ask or think. He's going to do something bigger than you can imagine, and we've seen that in our life. We continue to see that, and we see that in the lives of people who step forward and say yes to get involved, to support works through us, to give, to go on mission trips, to say yes to Jesus in all the different ways. Right? We get to see that people's eyes light up when they realize that God does have plans to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all you can ask or think.
Amen. And I love that verse. And you may feel afraid, like when God told me to go to different nations like Africa and Haiti and Guatemala, which is one of the places y'all I saw on your website, y'all help in Guatemala. I was afraid to go to those places. Like Guatemala has volcanoes and earthquakes and
Mhm.
extreme poverty. You may feel afraid, but if you obey God, say that yes, like Craig was saying, God will bless you so much and bless other people through you. So, Craig, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I'm so honored to meet you. How can people connect with you and y'all's organization? Any way they can contact you online and to help and to give?
Yeah, for sure. So the organization website is manna worldwide.com. So that's MANNA worldwide.com. My personal email address is c.alsup, so c.alsup at mannaworldwide.com. Definitely feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in mission trips, if your church wants to get involved with doing some more mission work to support kids and families and to grow the local church around the world. I'd love to talk with you. If you want to individually or through your business begin to give and support a work with vetted partners who we know are doing excellent work, who we know are going to do great things with those resources that you give. If you want to invest in the kingdom, definitely email me, reach out to me. I'd love to talk and share some ways that you can partner with us to get to support orphanages and schools and nutrition centers and medical clinics and all the different things. I'd love to connect you with that.
Love all that. I love that about the music too, because our daughter Leah plays the violin and the piano. And so even gifts like that, God wants to use and raise those people up. So thank you again, Craig. This is Beth at bethjones.net. Be blessed and have a beautiful day, and be sure to connect with Craig and Manna Worldwide.